On Christmas Eve, my son uninvited me to dinner and locked the door. I walked to the station in the snow. When I saw a man searching pockets for bus fare, I gave him my last $5 meant for hot chocolate. 2 hours later, a Bentley stopped at the bus stop. The man stepped out, pointed at me and said, "I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached." I stood on Wesley's front porch, clutching the small wrapped ornament in my coat pocket, my breath forming little clouds in the frigid December air. The house looked like something from a magazine, perfectly trimmed hedges dusted with snow, warm golden light spilling from every window, and that expensive wreath Sarah had probably ordered online hanging on the heavy oak door. My fingers were numb from the cold, but I'd been standing there for almost 10 minutes, working up the courage to ring the doorbell. 63 years old, and I still felt like a nervous child when it came to my own son. Through the bay window, I could see the Christmas tree, massive and perfectly decorated, nothing like the modest little tree I'd grown up with, or the scraggly ones Wesley and I used to decorate together when he was small. I caught glimpses of Wesley moving around inside, probably putting finishing touches on dinner. Sarah was there too, elegant as always in what looked like a new red dress. I'd spent my last $27 on the ornament in my pocket. It was a small silver angel, engraved with Wesley's first Christmas, the same one I'd bought 35 years ago when he was born. I'd saved it all these years, hoping someday we'd have the kind of relationship where I could give it to him, where he'd understand what it meant. Taking a deep breath, I finally pressed the doorbell. The chimes echoed through the house, some elaborate melody that probably cost more than my monthly groceries. I heard footsteps approaching, and my heart started beating faster. The door opened, and there was Wesley, my son, tall and handsome in his expensive sweater, but his face immediately hardened when he saw me. "Mom!" His voice was flat, like he was greeting a door-to-door salesman. "What are you doing here?" My voice caught. I'd rehearsed this moment so many times. "I brought you something for Christmas. I thought maybe we could—" "We told you not to come." Sarah appeared behind him, her perfectly manicured hand resting on his shoulder like a claim of ownership. "Wesley made it very clear that Christmas dinner is just for immediate family. Immediate family." The words hit me like a slap. I was his mother. If that didn't make me immediate family, what did? "I just wanted to see you," I said, my voice smaller than I intended. "It's Christmas Eve, Wesley. I haven't seen you since you caused that scene at Emma's birthday party," Wesley interrupted. Emma was my 6-year-old granddaughter. The scene had been me asking if I could take a picture with her. "I didn't cause a scene," I said quietly. "I just wanted—" "You always want something, Mom." Wesley's voice was getting harder, more distant. "You want attention? You want us to include you in everything. You want. But you never think about what we want." Each word felt like a nail being driven into my chest. Behind him, I could see the dining room table set for 6. Wesley, Sarah, her parents who lived in Florida and came up for holidays, and my 2 grandchildren. 6 place settings. There was no room for me at my own son's table. "You didn't know how to take care of me growing up," Wesley continued, and I felt my world tilt. "You were always working, always tired, always making excuses. Now you want to be grandmother of the year? It doesn't work that way." I opened my mouth to explain about the double shifts I worked to keep food on the table after his father died, about coming home exhausted but still helping with homework, about every sacrifice I made so he could have a better life. But Sarah stepped forward. "Wesley's right, Rena. You had your chance to be a mother. You can't just show up now and expect to be part of our family. Our family. Not the family. Our family. As if I was some outsider trying to force my way in." I looked at my son, really looked at him. When had his eyes become so cold? When had he learned to look at me like I was nothing more than an inconvenience? "Please," I whispered, hating how desperate I sounded. "I just want to spend Christmas with my family." "This is my family." Wesley gestured behind him at the warm, glowing house. "My wife, my children, my in-laws. You made your choices a long time ago, Mom. I'm making mine now. The ornament felt heavy in my pocket. 35 years I'd saved it. 35 years of hoping that someday my son would understand how much I loved him. I think it's best if you leave, Sarah said, her voice sickeningly sweet. The children are getting upset. I could hear Emma and her little brother playing in the background, their laughter mixing with Christmas music. My grandchildren, who barely knew me because every visit was a battle, every phone call screened through Sarah. Wesley, I tried one more time. Please, I'm your mother. For just a second, something flickered in his eyes, but then Sarah's hand tightened on his shoulder, and his expression went blank again. No, he said quietly. You gave birth to me. There's a difference. The door closed with a soft click, leaving me standing alone on the porch. Through the window, I watched my son return to his perfect Christmas dinner, his perfect family, his perfect life that had no room for me. I stood there for a long time, snow beginning to fall heavier now, soaking through my worn coat. The ornament seemed to burn in my pocket, a reminder of how foolish I'd been to think things could change. Finally, I turned and walked back down the driveway. My old Honda looked shabby next to Wesley's BMW and Sarah's Mercedes. Everything about me looked shabby compared to their life. I sat in my car for a few minutes, trying to stop crying. The heater barely worked, and my breath was fogging up the windshield. I'd used the last of my gas money to drive here, money I probably should have spent on groceries instead. But I couldn't sit there forever. The neighbors might call the police on the strange old woman parked outside. I started the car and drove away from Wesley's perfect neighborhood, away from the life I'd never be part of. The snow was coming down harder now, making driving treacherous. By the time I made it back to my side of town, the streets were slick and dangerous. I parked at the bus stop near my apartment. My car was on its last legs, and I didn't trust it to start again if the temperature dropped much more. The bus stop was just a bench under a flickering streetlight, no shelter from the snow. I sat down heavily, suddenly feeling every one of my 63 years. My feet were wet from snow that had seeped through the holes in my old boots. My fingers were so numb I couldn't feel the ornament anymore. That's when I saw him. A man was standing near the bus schedule, frantically patting his pockets. He looked to be in his 40s, nicely dressed but disheveled, like he'd been running. His hair was damp with snow, and he kept checking his watch with growing panic. "Excuse me," he called out to me. "Do you know when the next bus comes?" I squinted at the schedule through the falling snow. "Should be here in about 15 minutes. He let out a frustrated noise and went back to searching his pockets. "I can't find my wallet. I had it at the restaurant. I know I did. But now." He trailed off, looking genuinely distressed. I should have minded my own business. I had enough problems, but something about his desperation reminded me of myself, lost, stranded, with nowhere to go. "How much do you need?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Bus fare downtown was $5. $5, he confirmed, then shook his head. "But I couldn't ask you to—" I reached into my purse and pulled out my last $5 bill, the money I'd been saving for a hot chocolate from the vending machine at the hospital where I worked part-time cleaning offices. $4.50 for something warm to drink on this cold night, and 50 cents left over for the tip jar I always contributed to. "Here." I held out the bill. The man stared at it, then at me. "I can't take your money. You don't even know me. It's Christmas Eve," I said simply. "Everyone deserves to get home for Christmas." He took the money with hands that were shaking, either from cold or emotion. "Thank you. Thank you. I'll pay you back, I promise. If you give me your address—" "Don't worry about it." I was already feeling the cold seeping deeper into my bones. $5 wasn't going to change my life, but it might change his night. "What's your name?" he asked. "Rena. Rena." He said it like he was memorizing it. "I'm Robert, and I meant what I said about paying you back." I just nodded and pulled my coat tighter around me. The bus would be here soon for him. For me, it was a longer walk home through the snow, but I'd manage. I always managed. Robert seemed like he wanted to say more, but the bus was already visible in the distance, its headlights cutting through the falling snow. As it pulled up to the stop, he turned back to me one more time. Merry Christmas, Rena. And thank you, really. The bus doors opened with a pneumatic hiss, and Robert climbed aboard. Through the snow-streaked window, I saw him take a seat and pull out a cell phone. The bus pulled away, leaving me alone at the stop again. I sat there for a long time after that, watching the snow fall and thinking about the day. Wesley's cruel words echoed in my head, mixing with the cold and exhaustion. You didn't know how to take care of me. You had your chance to be a mother. Maybe he was right. Maybe I had failed him so completely that nothing I could do now would ever be enough. The ornament was still in my pocket, a useless token of a love that wasn't wanted. I pulled it out and looked at it under the streetlight. Such a small thing to carry so much hope. I was about to put it back when I heard a car approaching. The headlights were too bright, too expensive looking for this neighborhood. It slowed as it passed the bus stop, then made a U-turn and pulled up beside me. The window rolled down, and my heart nearly stopped. It was Robert, the man I'd just given my last $5 to. But he wasn't in the bus anymore. He was in what looked like a Bentley, and he was pointing directly at me. Get in the car, Rena. I stared at Robert through the open window of what was definitely a Bentley, the kind of car I'd only seen in movies. The leather seats looked warm and inviting, but my mind was reeling. How did a man who couldn't afford bus fare 20 minutes ago end up in a vehicle worth more than my annual income? I don't understand, I said, my voice barely audible over the wind. Snow was accumulating on my shoulders, and I could no longer feel my toes inside my wet boots. Please, Robert said, his voice urgent but gentle. You're going to freeze out here. We can talk inside where it's warm. Every instinct told me to walk away. 63 years of life had taught me to be cautious of strangers, especially ones whose stories didn't add up. But the alternative was a 15-minute walk through increasingly dangerous snow to my empty apartment, where the heat barely worked, and I'd spend Christmas Eve alone with my thoughts about Wesley's rejection. The passenger door opened with a soft click. The interior was warm, smelling of expensive leather and subtle cologne. As I settled into the seat, I noticed details that made my confusion deepen. The dashboard looked like something from a spaceship, all digital displays and gleaming metal. This wasn't just any luxury car. This was the kind of vehicle driven by people who appeared on magazine covers. Thank you, I said quietly, still trying to process what was happening. But I don't understand how— I owe you an explanation, Robert interrupted, pulling away from the curb. The car moved so smoothly, I barely felt we were moving at all. And an apology. He was different now, more composed, more confident. The desperate man searching his pockets for bus fare had been replaced by someone who clearly belonged in a car like this. But his eyes in the rearview mirror still held the same intensity that had struck me at the bus stop. Where are we going? I asked, suddenly realizing I'd gotten into a stranger's car without asking the most basic questions. Somewhere we can talk privately. Don't worry, it's a public place. A coffee shop that stays open late on Christmas Eve. The streets looked different from inside the Bentley. The same neighborhood I'd walked through countless times seemed smaller somehow, less threatening. Other cars moved out of our way as if Robert's vehicle commanded automatic respect. You gave me $5, he said suddenly. Your last $5, for a complete stranger. How do you know it was my last $5? Robert was quiet for a long moment, his hands steady on the steering wheel. Because I've been watching you, Rena, for weeks. My blood turned to ice. What? Not like that, he said quickly, seeing my expression in the mirror. Not in any way that should frighten you, but I've been. Observing your daily routines, your kindness to others, the way you live your life. I pressed myself against the passenger door, my hand finding the handle. Stop the car. Let me out right now. Rena, please. I know how this sounds, but you're not in any danger. I need you to trust me for just a few more minutes. Trust you? My voice was rising with panic. You just admitted to stalking me? And you want me to trust you? Robert pulled into the parking lot of an all-night diner, the kind of place that catered to shift workers and insomniacs. Through the windows, I could see a handful of customers nursing coffee cups and looking as lost as I felt. He turned off the engine but made no move to get out. "My name is Robert Hayes," he said, turning to face me fully. "I'm a private investigator. Someone hired me to gather information about you." The words hit me like physical blows. Information about me? What kind of information? Everything. Your daily routines, where you work, who you interact with, how you spend your money, whether you have any problematic behaviors. My mind raced. Who would hire someone to investigate me? I don't have enemies. I barely have friends. Robert's expression was pained. Someone who wants to prove you're an unfit person. Someone who needs evidence that you're irresponsible, selfish, maybe mentally unstable. The pieces began clicking together in a way that made me sick. Sarah. He nodded grimly. "Your daughter-in-law hired me 2 months ago. She wanted documentation that would support certain legal proceedings." Legal proceedings. The words echoed in my head as I tried to understand what was happening. What kind of legal proceedings? The kind that would prevent you from having any legal rights regarding your grandchildren, and possibly other matters involving inheritance or end-of-life decisions. I felt like I was drowning. Sarah hadn't just been manipulating Wesley against me. She'd been building a case, gathering evidence, preparing to destroy whatever remained of my connection to my family. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, my voice hollow. Robert ran a hand through his hair, looking suddenly exhausted. "Because what happened tonight, you giving me your last $5, knowing you needed it for yourself, it changed everything. I've been documenting your life for 2 months, Rena. I've watched you buy groceries for your elderly neighbor when her Social Security didn't cover everything. I've seen you stay late at work to help the younger cleaning staff learn their jobs better. I've watched you save every penny just so you could buy Christmas presents for grandchildren who barely know your name." Tears were sliding down my cheeks now, hot against my frozen skin. She's been building a case against me this whole time. Every time I called Wesley, every time I tried to visit, she was probably making notes about how pathetic I was. "Worse than that," Robert said quietly. "She's been creating situations designed to make you look bad. That scene at your granddaughter's birthday party? Sarah orchestrated it. She told Emma not to talk to you, then made sure everyone saw how difficult you were being when you tried to connect with your own granddaughter. The betrayal was so complete, so calculated, that I couldn't even feel angry. There was only a hollow emptiness where my heart should be. How long have you known? That she was setting me up? I started suspecting it about 3 weeks ago. But tonight, watching you give away money you clearly needed, seeing the genuine kindness in that gesture, I realized I couldn't go through with this anymore. I stared at him through my tears. "So what happens now? You go back and tell Sarah that I'm exactly as pathetic as she thought?" "No." Robert's voice was firm. "Now I help you fight back." The diner's neon sign flickered in my peripheral vision, casting alternating shadows across Robert's face. In the red light, he looked determined. In the blue, almost sad. "I don't understand," I said. "Why would you help me? You don't even know me. I know enough." He pulled out his phone and scrolled through what looked like dozens of photos and videos. "I know you work 2 jobs even though your arthritis makes it painful to stand for long periods. I know you send $25 every month to a children's charity even when you can barely afford groceries. I know you've never missed a day of work in 3 years, and you always volunteer for the worst shifts so the younger employees can spend time with their families." Each observation felt like a small validation of my existence. Someone had been watching, and instead of seeing the failure Wesley saw, they'd seen something worth defending. "But more than that," Robert continued, "I know what Sarah is really after. And it's not just about keeping you away from your grandchildren." "What do you mean?" His expression grew dark. "She knows about your life insurance policy, the $87,000 you've been saving to leave to Wesley. She's not just trying to cut you out of their lives, Rena. She's trying to make sure that when you die, Wesley will be declared your legal guardian with power of attorney. She wants control of your money, and she wants to make sure there's no one around who might question how she uses it." The magnitude of Sarah's manipulation was staggering. This wasn't just about family dynamics or her dislike of me. This was about money, control, and a level of calculated cruelty I'd never imagined. "She can't do that," I said weakly. "Wesley would never—" "Wesley doesn't know," Robert interrupted. "He thinks his wife is just trying to protect their family from a difficult mother-in-law. Sarah has been very careful to present herself as the reasonable one, just trying to maintain boundaries." I thought about Wesley's cold words tonight, his absolute certainty that I was the problem. How long had Sarah been poisoning him against me? How many small manipulations had led to this moment? "What kind of evidence does she think you're going to provide?" Robert's jaw tightened. "Photos of you looking unstable or desperate, documentation of your financial struggles, testimony about your behavior around the children. She wanted me to get you on video saying something that could be taken out of context, or catch you in some kind of compromising situation. And did you get that evidence?" He looked me straight in the eyes. "The only evidence I gathered proves the opposite of everything she wanted. You're not unstable, Rena. You're not a bad mother or grandmother. You're a woman who's been systematically isolated and manipulated by someone who sees you as nothing more than an obstacle to overcome." The coffee shop's lights seemed warmer now, more welcoming. Through the window, I could see a young waitress refilling someone's cup, probably working Christmas Eve to make ends meet, just like I would be tomorrow, going in to clean offices while other people spent the holiday with their families. "So, what do we do?" I asked, surprised to hear myself say, "we." A few hours ago, I'd been completely alone. Now I had an ally, even if I didn't fully understand his motives yet. Robert smiled for the first time since I'd gotten in the car, and it transformed his entire face. "We give Sarah exactly what she's been asking for. A chance to show her true colors in front of the whole family. I don't follow. New Year's Eve. Sarah's planning a big family gathering, right? She mentioned it to me during one of our meetings. She wanted to make sure I'd have plenty of opportunities to document your inappropriate behavior around the extended family." I nodded. Wesley had mentioned something about a party, though of course I hadn't been invited. "She doesn't know I've switched sides," Robert continued. "As far as she's concerned, I'm still working for her, still gathering evidence, which means I have access to her plans, her real motivations, everything she thinks she's hidden." A small spark of something that might have been hope flickered in my chest. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting we let Sarah think she's won. Let her get comfortable, let her guard down. And then we show your family exactly who she really is." The snow was still falling outside, but it no longer looked threatening. It looked clean, fresh, like it was washing away everything that had come before and preparing the ground for something new. "Why?" I asked one more time. "Why are you willing to risk your career to help me?" Robert was quiet for a long moment, watching the snow accumulate on the windshield. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft but steady. "Because 30 years ago, a woman about your age gave my family $5 when we were stranded at a bus stop on Christmas Eve. My father had just lost his job. We'd been evicted from our apartment, and we were trying to get to a shelter before they closed for the night. That $5 got us there safely." My breath caught. "Robert, it wasn't about the money," he continued. "It was about someone seeing us as human beings worth helping when everyone else looked right through us. That woman probably saved our lives, and I never got a chance to thank her." He turned to look at me, and I saw my own reflection in his eyes. Not the pathetic old woman Wesley saw, but someone worth fighting for. "I can't repay her anymore," Robert said, "but I can repay her kindness, and I think I just found the perfect way to do it." Robert's office was nothing like I'd expected. The 23rd floor of a downtown high-rise with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city lights. Everything was clean lines and expensive furniture, the kind of place that screamed success. I felt out of place in my damp coat and worn boots, but Robert didn't seem to notice. "Coffee?" he asked, moving to a machine that looked more complicated than my entire kitchen. "Please." I was still trying to process everything he'd told me in the car. Sarah had hired him. For 2 months, someone had been watching my every move, documenting my life like I was some kind of criminal. Robert handed me a steaming mug, real ceramic, not the paper cups I was used to. The coffee was rich and warm, probably worth more per ounce than I spent on groceries in a day. "I want to show you something," he said, settling behind his desk. "But I need you to prepare yourself. What you're about to see, it's going to be difficult." I set down my coffee with hands that weren't quite steady. "Show me." Robert opened his laptop and turned the screen toward me. The first thing I saw was a photo of myself, taken from across a parking lot. I was coming out of the grocery store, struggling with bags that were clearly too heavy for me. The timestamp showed it was from 3 weeks ago. "She wanted documentation of your daily activities," Robert explained, clicking to the next image. "Proof that you were struggling financially, that you looked." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Unstable." The next photo showed me at the bus stop near my apartment, waiting in the rain because my car wouldn't start. I remembered that day. I'd been running late for my cleaning job at the hospital, and I'd called in to explain I might be a few minutes behind schedule. In the photo, I looked bedraggled and desperate. "Sarah's instructions were very specific," Robert continued. "She wanted pictures that would make you look like a burden, someone who couldn't take care of herself, let alone be trusted around children." Photo after photo scrolled by, me counting change at the grocery store, me walking to work because I couldn't afford gas, me sitting alone at the diner on Thanksgiving because I had nowhere else to go. Each image felt like a violation, but worse than that, they told the story Sarah wanted told, of a pathetic old woman barely hanging on to dignity. "This is what she was planning to show Wesley," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Along with this." Robert clicked to a new folder, and suddenly I was looking at video footage. The quality was poor, clearly shot from a distance, but I could see myself clearly enough. I was at Emma's 6th birthday party, the one Wesley had mentioned as my scene. "Watch carefully," Robert said. "This is what really happened that day." In the video, I could see myself arriving at the park where they'd held the party. Emma ran toward me with a big smile, but before she could reach me, Sarah intercepted her. I watched Sarah lean down and whisper something in Emma's ear. Immediately, Emma's expression changed from excited to confused. "She told Emma you were sick," Robert said quietly, "that you might be contagious, and she shouldn't get too close." On screen, I watched myself try to interact with my granddaughter, saw Emma's reluctant responses, her obvious confusion. Then I saw Sarah position herself to make it look like I was being pushy, demanding attention from a child who was clearly uncomfortable. "The way Sarah edited this footage for Wesley, it looked like you were harassing Emma. She cut out the part where she poisoned Emma's mind against you." Tears were streaming down my face now. "She planned it. All of it. Every interaction you've had with your family for the past 3 months has been orchestrated by Sarah. She's been setting traps, creating situations designed to make you look bad." Robert clicked to another video, this one from what looked like a security camera. "This is from the hospital where you work. Sarah came by 2 weeks ago, pretending to be a concerned family member checking on an elderly relative who was acting strangely. In the footage, I could see Sarah talking to my supervisor, Mrs. Chen. She was animated, concerned, explaining something that was clearly troubling her deeply. What was she telling her? That your behavior at home had been erratic. That Wesley was worried about your mental state, but didn't want to hurt your feelings by addressing it directly. She suggested that if there were any problems with your work performance, they should document them carefully." My stomach dropped. "Did she find anything? Problems with my work?" Robert's expression softened. "The opposite. Mrs. Chen told Sarah that you were one of their most reliable employees, that you'd never missed a day, never had a complaint, always went above and beyond. She actually asked Sarah if she was sure she was talking about the right person." Relief flooded through me, followed quickly by anger. Sarah was trying to get me fired. She was trying to build a case that you were declining mentally and couldn't be trusted with responsibilities. If she could get you fired, lose your income, make you more dependent on Wesley's help, it would support her narrative that you needed to be taken care of. The pieces were falling into place now, creating a picture so calculated and cruel that I could barely comprehend it. This wasn't just dislike or even hatred. This was a systematic campaign to destroy my life. "There's more," Robert said, his voice grave. "And this is the part that made me realize I couldn't continue working for her." He opened another file, and I heard Sarah's voice before I saw her face. The recording quality was crystal clear. Robert had obviously been wearing some kind of device during their meetings. "I need something definitive," Sarah's voice said. "Something that would hold up in court if necessary." "What kind of court proceedings are you anticipating?" Robert's voice responded. "Well, if something were to happen to Rena, an accident, a health scare, anything that proved she couldn't take care of herself, Wesley would need to step in as her guardian. But there are legal requirements for that. We'd need to prove she's incompetent." My blood ran cold. She was talking about having me declared mentally incompetent. "And if Wesley became her guardian," Robert's recorded voice prompted, "then he'd have control over her finances, her medical decisions, everything. Which is really what's best for everyone, including Rena. She's clearly struggling to manage on her own." "What about her life insurance policy?" There was a pause on the recording, then Sarah's voice again, sharper now. "How do you know about that?" "It came up in my financial background check. $87,000, with Wesley named as beneficiary." "Exactly. And right now, if something happened to Rena, Wesley would inherit that money directly. But she's stubborn enough that she might change her will if she gets angry with us. If Wesley is her legal guardian, he can make sure that doesn't happen." I felt sick. She wasn't just trying to cut me out of their lives. She was planning for my death, making sure she'd control whatever I left behind. "The thing is," Sarah continued on the recording, "Rena's already old and not in great health. These things have a way of working themselves out naturally, if you know what I mean." The implication hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Robert stopped the recording and looked at me with something that might have been pity. "She's not just planning to have you declared incompetent," he said quietly. "She's counting on you dying soon, and she wants to make sure that when you do, Wesley has complete control over your estate." I sat in silence for a long moment, trying to process the depth of Sarah's cruelty. This woman had spent 3 months systematically destroying my relationship with my son, not out of hatred or jealousy, but out of cold calculation. I was worth more to her dead than alive, but only if she could control Wesley completely. "How long have you known?" I asked finally. "About her real plans?" "I started suspecting something was wrong about a month ago. The requests were getting more specific, more invasive. She wanted me to try to catch you doing something that looked dangerous or reckless. She suggested I might try to provoke you somehow, get you upset enough to say something that could be taken out of context." "Did you? Try to provoke me?" Robert shook his head. "I followed you for weeks, Rena. I watched you live your life with more grace and dignity than anyone should have to under those circumstances. I saw you give up meals so you could afford Christmas presents for grandchildren who barely know your name. I watched you stay late at work to help train new employees, even when you weren't being paid for the extra time. I documented every act of kindness, every small sacrifice, every moment that proved exactly the opposite of what Sarah wanted me to find." He opened another folder on his laptop, this one filled with videos and photos I'd never seen before. Me helping my elderly neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, carry her groceries up the stairs. Me staying after my shift to help a new cleaner understand how to properly sanitize the operating rooms. Me at the diner, sharing my meal with a homeless man who'd been turned away from the shelter. "I've been investigating people for 15 years, Robert said. "I've seen real mental illness, real incompetence, real danger. What I saw when I watched you was a woman who'd been systematically isolated and impoverished, but who never let it break her spirit." Looking at those images of myself through Robert's eyes, I saw something I hadn't recognized before. Not the failure Wesley believed I was, not the burden Sarah wanted to prove I'd become, but someone who'd survived and remained kind despite everything. "What about tonight?" I asked. "The bus stop, giving you the $5. Was that part of your investigation?" Robert's expression grew complicated. "I was supposed to meet Sarah tonight to deliver my final report, but I couldn't do it. I couldn't hand over evidence that would destroy an innocent woman's life." So I went to the bus stop instead, planning to take the bus downtown and disappear. Find a way out of this contract without hurting you. But you didn't have money for the bus. I'd thrown my wallet in a trash can 6 blocks away. I was so disgusted with myself, with what I'd been hired to do, that I couldn't stand to carry the money Sarah had paid me. He leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. When you gave me that $5, money you clearly needed for yourself, it crystallized everything I'd been feeling. Here was a woman who'd been painted as selfish and irresponsible, giving her last money to a stranger. It was the final proof I needed that everything Sarah had told me about you was a lie. So what happens now? I asked. Sarah's expecting a report. Robert smiled, and for the first time since I'd met him, it reached his eyes. She's going to get one, just not the one she's expecting. He turned his laptop back toward himself and opened what looked like a comprehensive document. I've spent the last 2 months documenting everything about your life, Rena. Every conversation with Sarah, every instruction she gave me, every manipulation she orchestrated. I have enough evidence to prove that Wesley's been systematically turned against his own mother by a woman who sees you as nothing more than a financial obstacle. Will Wesley believe it? He seems so convinced that I'm the problem. He'll believe it when he sees the recordings, when he hears his wife planning to have his mother declared mentally incompetent so she can control your money, when he realizes that every complaint he's had about you for the past 3 months was planted in his head by someone with a very specific agenda. Robert closed the laptop and looked at me seriously. But I need to warn you, Rena, when we expose this, it's going to get ugly. Sarah's not going to go down without a fight. She's invested too much time and effort in this plan to give up easily. I thought about Wesley's cold words on the doorstep tonight, about my grandchildren who barely knew me, about the years of loneliness that stretched ahead if nothing changed. Then I thought about Sarah's voice on that recording, discussing my death like it was a business opportunity. What do you need me to do? For now, nothing. Go home. Act normal. Sarah doesn't know I've switched sides yet. She's planning something for New Year's Eve. Some kind of family gathering where she wants to document your inappropriate behavior one final time. Let her think she's still in control. And then? Robert's smile turned sharp, predatory. Then we show your family exactly who Sarah really is. And we make sure that when the dust settles, you get back everything she tried to take from you. As I stood to leave, wrapping my damp coat around me again, Robert called my name. Rena? That woman who helped my family 30 years ago? She had gray hair and kind eyes, and she was wearing a coat that had seen better days. She looked exactly like someone who would give away her last $5 to help a stranger. I felt tears spring to my eyes again, but this time they weren't tears of pain. For the first time in months, maybe years, someone was seeing me clearly, not as a burden or a failure, but as someone worth fighting for. Thank you, I whispered. Thank you, Robert replied, for reminding me why I became an investigator in the first place, to find the truth, not to create convenient lies. As the elevator carried me back down to street level, I felt something I hadn't experienced in so long I'd almost forgotten what it was like. Hope. Real, solid hope that maybe this story wasn't over yet. Maybe there was still time to fight back, to reclaim my place in my own family's life. Sarah thought she'd won, but she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated the power of simple human kindness and the length some people would go to protect it. The next morning, Christmas Day, I woke up in my empty apartment feeling like I was living someone else's life. Everything looked the same. The threadbare furniture, the radiator that clanked all night, the single window that faced the brick wall of the building next door. But somehow, knowing that Robert was out there, knowing that I wasn't completely alone anymore, made even this depressing space feel different. My phone rang at exactly 9 o'clock. I almost didn't answer. Unknown numbers usually meant telemarketers or bill collectors, but something made me pick up. Merry Christmas, Rena. It was Robert's voice, warm and reassuring. Merry Christmas, I replied, though the words felt strange. I'd spent Christmas alone for the past 3 years, ever since Sarah had convinced Wesley that family holidays were just for the nuclear family. I hope you don't mind me calling so early, But we need to meet. Something's happened that changes our timeline significantly. My stomach clenched. What kind of something? Sarah called me at 7 this morning. She wants to move up our final meeting. She's planning to present my findings to Wesley tomorrow, December 26th. She can't wait until New Year's Eve. I sank onto my couch, still in my bathrobe. Why the rush? I think she's getting nervous. Maybe she sensed that something was off about our conversation yesterday, or maybe she's just eager to get this over with. Either way, we have less time than we thought. What does that mean for us? It means we need to accelerate our own plans. Can you meet me this afternoon? There are things you need to see and decisions we need to make together. After hanging up, I made myself a cup of instant coffee and tried to process this development. Sarah was moving faster than expected, which meant she was either more confident or more desperate than Robert had anticipated. Neither possibility seemed good for me. I spent the morning trying to distract myself with household chores, but my mind kept wandering to Wesley. Was he having Christmas dinner with Sarah's family right now? Were my grandchildren opening presents I'd never be allowed to give them? Had Wesley thought about me at all since slamming the door in my face? At 2 o'clock, I met Robert at a small restaurant across town, the kind of place that stayed open on Christmas for people with nowhere else to go. The clientele was a mix of elderly loners, service workers taking breaks, and families who couldn't afford to cook holiday meals at home. I felt more comfortable here than I had in his fancy office. Robert was already waiting in a back booth, looking tired but determined. He'd traded his expensive suit for jeans and a sweater, but he still looked out of place among the working-class crowd. I spent the morning going through everything again, he said as I sat down. I wanted to make sure I hadn't missed anything that might help us. And I found something. Something that explains why Sarah's in such a hurry. He pulled out a tablet and showed me what looked like a legal document. The text was dense and full of terminology I didn't understand, but I could make out my name at the top. What is this? It's a petition for emergency guardianship that Sarah filed 3 weeks ago. She's claiming that you're experiencing rapid mental decline and pose a danger to yourself. The words blurred as I tried to read them. A danger to myself? She's documented what she calls incidents of erratic behavior. Missing work, which never happened. Forgetting to pay bills, also untrue. Making concerning statements about wanting to end the pain, complete fabrication. My hands were shaking as I held the tablet. She's trying to have me declared incompetent. Worse than that. She's requesting emergency powers, which means if the petition is approved, Wesley would have immediate authority over your housing, your medical care, your finances, everything. And emergency guardianship petitions are often approved with minimal investigation, especially when they involve elderly people with limited resources. I felt like I was drowning. When is the hearing? January 3rd. But here's the thing. If Sarah presents my investigation as supporting evidence of your mental decline, the petition becomes much stronger. She's been planning this perfectly, building a case piece by piece. The restaurant suddenly felt too small, too hot. I couldn't breathe properly. She's going to win, isn't she? Wesley will believe her report, and the court will believe both of them. Not if we get to Wesley first. Robert leaned across the table, his expression intense. I've been thinking about this all morning. Sarah's weakness is her confidence. She thinks she's thought of everything, covered all her bases. But she made one crucial mistake. What mistake? She hired an honest investigator. He opened another file on his tablet, this one showing what looked like a detailed timeline. Every conversation Sarah and I had was recorded. She insisted on it, wanted documentation of my progress. Every instruction she gave me, every lie she told, every manipulation she orchestrated, it's all here. I studied the timeline, seeing dates and times that corresponded to moments I remembered. The birthday party incident, the visit to my workplace, Wesley's increasingly cold treatment of me over the past months. This proves that Sarah was orchestrating everything? More than that, it proves she was planning to have you declared incompetent from the very beginning. This wasn't just about keeping you away from the grandchildren. This was always about gaining legal control over your life and your money. Robert scrolled to another document. And there's something else. Something I discovered when I was doing the financial background check Sarah requested. The screen showed what looked like a bank statement, but not one I recognized. What is this? It's Wesley's checking account. Sarah added me as an authorized investigator so I could access financial records if needed. Look at the transactions from the past 6 months. I scanned the numbers, not understanding what I was supposed to see. There were regular deposits, Wesley's salary I assumed, and then various withdrawals and expenses. But some of the amounts seemed unusually large. Here, Robert pointed to a series of withdrawals. $1,500 to Legal Services LLC in October, another $2,000 in November, $3,000 just last week. What's Legal Services LLC? The law firm handling Sarah's guardianship petition. Wesley's been paying the legal fees to have his own mother declared incompetent, and he doesn't even know it. The betrayal was so complete, so devastating, that I couldn't even cry anymore. Sarah hadn't just manipulated Wesley emotionally. She'd been using his own money to finance her legal attack against me. There's more, Robert continued, his voice grim. Look at this expense from 2 months ago. He pointed to a line item that read, Private Investigation Services, R. Hayes Consulting, $5,000. Wesley paid your fee? To investigate me? Without knowing what he was paying for, Sarah told him it was for a background check on a potential business partner. She's been using his money to fund every aspect of her campaign against you. I stared at the numbers, trying to process the implications. My son had unknowingly paid thousands of dollars for someone to spy on me, to build a case for having me declared mentally incompetent, to destroy what remained of our relationship. How long do we have before she presents this to Wesley? She wants to meet with me at 4 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. She's planning to show Wesley my report immediately afterward, probably at dinner tomorrow night. Then she'll file the amended guardianship petition with my findings as supporting evidence. And the court hearing? January 3rd, just over a week away. I felt the walls closing in around me. A week to somehow undo months of careful manipulation, to convince Wesley that his wife had been systematically destroying his relationship with his mother, to fight a legal battle I couldn't afford with evidence I didn't understand. I can't win this, I said quietly. Even with your help, even knowing the truth, I can't compete with Sarah's resources and planning. Robert was quiet for a long moment, stirring his coffee thoughtfully. When he finally spoke, his voice was determined. You're right that we can't win this fight on Sarah's terms. But what if we change the battlefield entirely? What do you mean? Sarah's plan depends on controlling the narrative, presenting information in a specific way at a specific time. But what if Wesley heard the truth before she had a chance to spin it? He won't listen to me. He made that clear on Christmas Eve. He might not listen to you. But he'll listen to his wife's own voice, recorded without her knowledge, planning to manipulate him and steal from his mother. Robert leaned forward, his eyes bright with possibility. Sarah doesn't know I've turned against her. She's expecting to meet with me tomorrow to collect evidence that will destroy you. But what if, instead of giving her ammunition, I gave Wesley the truth? You want to tell Wesley everything? I want to show Wesley everything. The recordings, the financial evidence, the real timeline of Sarah's manipulation. I want him to hear his wife's voice planning to have his mother declared mentally incompetent so she can control your money. My heart started beating faster. Would he believe it? The evidence is overwhelming, Rena. Wesley's been manipulated, but he's not stupid. When he sees the proof, when he hears Sarah's own words, he'll understand what's been happening. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a flicker of real hope. When would you tell him? Tomorrow morning. I'll call him early. Tell him I have urgent information about the investigation Sarah commissioned. I'll meet with him before Sarah has a chance to present her version of events. And then, Robert's smile was sharp, determined. Then we let Sarah walk into a trap of her own making. She thinks she's about to deliver the final blow against you. Instead, she'll walk into a room where Wesley already knows the truth about what she's been doing. I tried to imagine the scene. Sarah, confident and prepared, presenting her carefully constructed case to a husband who already knew she'd been lying and manipulating him for months. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. What if it doesn't work? What if Wesley chooses to believe Sarah anyway? Robert's expression grew serious. Then we fight this in court. I have enough evidence to prove that Sarah's guardianship petition is based on fraudulent claims. It would be a harder battle, and more public, but we could win. And if we lose in court, we won't lose, Rena. Not with the evidence we have, but if somehow the impossible happened, if every system failed. He paused, meeting my eyes steadily. Then I'd make sure you had options. Ways to protect yourself that Sarah couldn't touch. I didn't ask what he meant by that. Some possibilities were better left unspoken. I need to ask you something, I said finally. And I need you to be completely honest with me. Of course. Why are you really doing this? You said it was about repaying a kindness from 30 years ago, but this goes way beyond that. You're risking your career, possibly your safety. People like Sarah don't lose gracefully. Robert was quiet for a long time, staring out the restaurant window at the empty Christmas streets. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft but steady. My mother died 3 years ago. Alzheimer's. My sister and I had to put her in a care facility because we couldn't manage her needs anymore. He turned back to me, and I saw pain in his eyes that had nothing to do with our current situation. The last 2 years of her life, she didn't recognize us. But sometimes, in her clearer moments, she would talk about feeling abandoned, forgotten. She would ask why her children never visited, even though we were there every day. The disease had stolen her memories, but it left behind the emotions, the loneliness, the fear of being unwanted. So I reached across the table and touched his hand. I'm sorry. Watching you these past 2 months, seeing how Sarah was systematically isolating you from your family, it reminded me of my mother's fears. The difference is, your isolation isn't caused by disease. It's being deliberately created by someone who should be protecting you. He squeezed my hand gently. I couldn't save my mother from Alzheimer's, but I can save you from Sarah. And maybe, in doing that, I can find some peace with the things I couldn't fix in my own family. I understood then that this was about more than justice or repaying old kindnesses. This was about 2 people who'd lost family connections. Him through death, me through manipulation, trying to reclaim something precious that had been stolen. What do you need me to do? I asked. Go home. Act normal. If Sarah or Wesley contact you, don't let on that anything has changed. Tomorrow morning, everything will be different. As we prepared to leave the restaurant, Robert handed me a small device that looked like a pager. What's this? Emergency communicator. If something goes wrong, if Sarah suspects anything, if you feel unsafe for any reason, press this button. I'll get an alert and come to wherever you are immediately. The weight of it in my palm was both comforting and terrifying. Do you think I'll need it? Robert's expression was grim. I hope not, but Sarah's invested too much in this plan to give up easily. When she realizes she's lost control of the situation, she might do something desperate. As I walked home through the quiet Christmas evening, I tried to prepare myself for what was coming. Tomorrow, the truth would finally come out. Wesley would learn what his wife had been doing, and I would either get my family back or lose them forever. Either way, the waiting would finally be over. I barely slept that night. Every sound in the building made me jump. Footsteps in the hallway, pipes groaning, the elevator creaking up and down. By 6 in the morning, I gave up trying to rest and made coffee with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Robert had said he would call Wesley at 8 o'clock. That gave me 2 hours to wait. 2 hours to imagine everything that could go wrong. What if Wesley refused to meet with him? What if Sarah had already poisoned the well so completely that Wesley wouldn't believe any evidence against his wife? At 7:30, my phone rang. Robert's voice was calm but focused when I answered. It's happening, he said. Wesley agreed to meet me at 9. I told him I had urgent information about the investigation Sarah commissioned, and that it couldn't wait. How did he sound? Suspicious, but not hostile. I think he's curious about what I might have found. Sarah's been building up anticipation for this report for weeks. After Robert hung up, I paced my small apartment like a caged animal. I tried to distract myself by cleaning, by organizing my already organized closets, by anything that would keep my hands busy and my mind from spiraling into worst-case scenarios. At 9:15, Robert called again. "He knows," Robert said without preamble. I showed him everything. The recordings, the financial records, the timeline of Sarah's manipulation. He's devastated, but he believes it. Relief flooded through me so suddenly I had to sit down. How did he take it? About how you'd expect. Shock, then anger, then something close to panic. He keeps asking how he could have been so blind, how he could have let Sarah manipulate him against his own mother. What did you tell him? The truth, that Sarah is very good at what she does, and that manipulation works best on people who love and trust the manipulator. He's not stupid, Rena. He's just been systematically lied to by someone he had no reason to doubt. I closed my eyes, trying to process the enormity of what this meant. After months of rejection, Wesley finally knew the truth about what had been happening. What happens now? Wesley wants to confront Sarah directly, but I convinced him to wait. Sarah's supposed to meet with me at 4 o'clock this afternoon to collect my final report. Wesley's going to be there, hidden, listening to everything she says. You want her to incriminate herself further? I want her to reveal her true nature completely, with no possibility of denial or excuse. Sarah's been very careful to present herself as reasonable and caring. But when she thinks she's won, when she thinks she's finally getting what she wants, she'll drop the mask. Robert's plan was elegant in its simplicity. Sarah would walk into what she thought was a victory meeting, expecting to receive evidence that would destroy me. Instead, she would reveal her own malicious intentions in front of the husband she'd been manipulating. I need to warn you, Robert continued. Sarah's going to be furious when she realizes what's happened. She might try to contact you directly, and she won't be pretending to be nice anymore. I understand. Keep that emergency device with you. If she shows up at your apartment, if she threatens you in any way, use it immediately. The morning dragged by like a slow torture. I tried to imagine what Wesley was feeling, learning that his wife had spent months orchestrating a campaign against his mother. Did he feel guilty? Angry? Betrayed? All of those emotions were certainly what I would feel in his position. At 11, my phone rang. Wesley's name appeared on the screen, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. Mom? His voice was thick with emotion, barely recognizable. Wesley. I had to clear my throat to get the word out. Mom, God, I don't even know how to begin. What I said to you on Christmas Eve, the way I've been treating you. He broke off and I could hear him crying. Wesley. No, let me say this. I've been horrible to you, cruel, and all because I believed, because she made me believe. He took a shuddering breath. I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm so incredibly sorry. Tears were streaming down my face now. It's okay. You couldn't have known. But I should have known. You're my mother. I should have trusted you over anyone else. I should have questioned why suddenly everything you did seemed wrong to me. Sarah's very convincing, I said gently. She made you see what she wanted you to see. The things she said about you, the stories she told. Mom, I've been paying thousands of dollars for a legal case against you that I didn't even know about. My own money was being used to try to destroy you. The pain in his voice was almost unbearable. Wesley, listen to me. What matters now is that you know the truth. We can get through this together. Can we? Can you forgive me for what I've put you through? You're my son, I said simply. There's nothing to forgive. We talked for almost an hour. Wesley told me how Sarah had gradually changed his perception of me, always with seemingly reasonable explanations and loving concern. She'd painted every one of my actions in the worst possible light, reframed every conversation to make me seem selfish or unstable. The Christmas ornament, Wesley said suddenly. The one you brought on Christmas Eve. What was it? I told him about the silver angel, about saving it for 35 years. Hoping someday we'd have the kind of relationship where such a gift would mean something. I want it, he said fiercely. I want that ornament, and I want to hang it on our tree together. What about Sarah? Wesley's voice hardened. Sarah won't be a problem much longer. At 3:30 that afternoon, I couldn't stand the waiting anymore. I walked to the small park near my apartment, needing fresh air and movement to calm my nerves. The emergency communicator Robert had given me felt heavy in my pocket, a constant reminder of how dangerous this situation could become. At 4:15, my phone rang. It's done, Robert said. Sarah showed her true colors completely. What happened? She walked into my office expecting to celebrate. When I showed her the fabricated evidence she was expecting, documentation of your mental decline and dangerous behavior, she was gleeful. Absolutely gleeful. My stomach twisted. What did she say? Things that no decent person would say about anyone, let alone their spouse's mother. She talked about how this would finally give her complete control over the situation, how she could make sure you never had any contact with the grandchildren again, how Wesley would finally understand that she'd been protecting the family from you all along. Wesley heard all of this? Every word. When Sarah started discussing the timeline for having you declared mentally incompetent, Wesley stepped out of his hiding place. I could only imagine the scene. Sarah, caught in the act of celebrating what she thought was my destruction, suddenly facing a husband who knew the truth about everything she'd done. How did she react? Panic? Then anger? Then more lies? She tried to claim that everything she'd done was for Wesley's own good, that I must have manipulated the evidence somehow. But it was too late. Wesley had heard her in her own words, planning to steal your money and destroy your life. Where is she now? Gone. Wesley told her to leave their house immediately. He's filing for divorce tomorrow, and for an emergency restraining order. Sarah's not allowed to have any contact with the children without supervision. The reversal was so complete, so sudden, that I felt dizzy. 12 hours ago, Sarah had been on the verge of winning everything. Now she'd lost her husband, her home, her access to the grandchildren she'd used as weapons against me. Wesley wants to see you, Robert continued. Tonight, if you're ready. He's at the house with Emma and little James, and he wants to explain everything to them. He wants them to understand that Grandma Rena isn't the bad person they've been told she is. My heart was pounding. Are you sure they'll want to see me? After everything they've heard? Wesley's been talking to them about it. Emma especially is old enough to understand that she was told lies about you. She feels terrible about how she acted at her birthday party. An hour later, I stood on Wesley's front porch again, but this time everything was different. The same house, the same warm light spilling from the windows, but now I wasn't an unwelcome intruder. I was a grandmother coming home to her family. Wesley opened the door before I could ring the bell. His eyes were red from crying, his face haggard with exhaustion and guilt. For a moment, we just looked at each other, mother and son, trying to bridge months of manufactured distance. Mom, he said, and pulled me into his arms. We held each other on the doorstep, both of us crying, both of us trying to absorb the reality that the nightmare was finally over. When we finally pulled apart, I saw Emma peeking around the corner, watching us with wide, uncertain eyes. It's okay, sweetheart, Wesley called to her. Come meet your real grandma. Emma approached slowly, clearly confused by the dramatic change in how I was being treated. Behind her, 4-year-old James clutched a stuffed animal, watching the scene with the accepting curiosity of a child too young to understand the adult complications. Grandma Rena, Emma said hesitantly, Daddy says Mommy told lies about you, that you're really nice and you love us very much. I knelt down to Emma's level, my heart breaking for this little girl who'd been used as a pawn in Sarah's cruel game. I do love you very much, I said softly. And I'm sorry if I ever did anything to make you feel scared or uncomfortable. Daddy says you brought me a present for my birthday, but Mommy told me not to take it. I did, and I have lots more presents I've been saving up for when you were ready to receive them. Emma looked at Wesley, who nodded encouragingly. Then she stepped forward and hugged me, her small arms wrapping around my neck with surprising fierceness. I'm sorry I was mean to you, she whispered in my ear. You weren't mean, sweetheart. You were just trying to be good and listen to the adults in your life. That's what smart little girls do. As Emma pulled back, James toddled over and studied me with serious dark eyes. Gamma Wena? He said, testing out the words. That's right, I said, my voice thick with emotion. I'm Grandma Rena. James considered this for a moment, then held out his stuffed animal for my inspection. Bear, he announced solemnly. He's a very nice bear, I told him, and was rewarded with a shy smile. Wesley showed me around the house. Not the cold, unwelcoming mansion it had seemed before, but a warm family home where I was finally welcome. He'd already removed all the photos that included Sarah, he told me. He wanted no reminders of the woman who'd almost succeeded in destroying his relationship with his mother. As the evening went on, Emma gradually warmed up to me. She showed me her room, her toys, the drawings she'd made at school. James followed us around, occasionally offering me his bear or a toy car for examination. Slowly, carefully, we began building the relationship that Sarah had prevented us from having. I need you to know something, Wesley said as we tucked the children into bed. I'm going to spend the rest of my life making up for what happened, for what I let happen. Wesley. No, I need to say this. I almost lost you completely because I was too blind to see what was right in front of me. I'm never going to let anyone come between us again. After the children were asleep, Wesley and I sat in his living room, the same room where I'd been rejected so cruelly just 2 days before, and talked until well past midnight. He wanted to know everything about the past months, about how I'd survived Sarah's campaign against me, about whether I could ever truly forgive him. There's something else, Wesley said finally. The guardianship petition Sarah filed. We need to make sure it's withdrawn completely. Robert mentioned that. Is it complicated? It would have been if we'd had to fight it. But since Sarah filed it under false pretenses and we have recorded evidence of her admitting to fraud, it should be straightforward. Robert's already contacted the court. Wesley pulled out his phone and showed me a message. He sent this an hour ago. The petition has been officially withdrawn. You're safe, Mom. Completely safe. As I prepared to leave that night, Wesley handed me a small wrapped package. I want you to have this now, he said. Inside was the silver angel ornament I'd brought on Christmas Eve. Wesley had retrieved it from where I'd left it on the side table, and now he was giving it back to me. I want you to keep it, he said, as a reminder that no matter what anyone tries to do to tear us apart, we're family. Real family. And nothing Sarah did changes that. I held the ornament up to the light, watching it catch and reflect the warm glow from Wesley's Christmas tree. Such a small thing, but it represented so much. Hope fulfilled, love restored, family reunited. Thank you, I whispered. Thank you, Wesley replied, for never giving up on us, even when we gave up on you. As Robert drove me home that night, he'd insisted on providing transportation, not wanting me to navigate the emotional aftermath alone. I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Complete peace. How are you feeling? Robert asked as we pulled up to my building. Like I can finally breathe again, I said honestly. For months, I felt like I was drowning, like everything I did only made things worse. Now you have your family back, and I have you, I said, surprising myself with the admission. Whatever this is between us, whatever it becomes, I want you to know that you saved more than just my relationship with Wesley. You saved me from giving up entirely. Robert's smile was gentle, understanding. You saved me too, Rena. You reminded me why truth matters, why fighting for good people is worth any risk. As I climbed the stairs to my apartment, I felt lighter than I had in months. Tomorrow, Sarah would begin dealing with the consequences of her actions. Wesley would start divorce proceedings, and I would begin rebuilding my relationships with my grandchildren. But tonight, I was simply a woman who'd gotten her family back against all odds, thanks to $5 given in kindness to a stranger who turned out to be exactly the ally I needed. The ornament sat on my kitchen table, catching the light from the overhead bulb. Tomorrow, Wesley and I would hang it on his tree together, the first of many new traditions we'd build as we worked to heal what Sarah had tried to destroy forever. 6 months later, I stood in the kitchen of my new apartment, a bright, spacious place just 10 minutes from Wesley's house, watching my granddaughter Emma help me frost cupcakes for her little brother's 5th birthday party. Flour dusted her dark hair, and chocolate icing smeared her cheek, but her concentration was absolute as she carefully piped frosting flowers onto each cupcake. "Like this, Grandma Rena?" she asked, showing me her handiwork. "Perfect, sweetheart. James is going to love them." It was hard to believe how much had changed since that snowy Christmas Eve when I'd given my last $5 to a stranger at a bus stop. The stranger who had become so much more than an ally in my fight against Sarah's manipulation. "Is Robert coming to the party?" Emma asked, as if reading my thoughts. "He is," I said, unable to suppress my smile. "He'll be here soon." Emma grinned. "Good. He promised to teach James how to make paper airplanes." Robert had become a fixture in our lives over the past months, but not in the way I'd originally expected. What had started as professional assistance had gradually transformed into something deeper, more personal. He attended family dinners, helped Wesley with legal paperwork related to the divorce, and had won over both grandchildren with his patience and gentle humor. As for Sarah, she had disappeared from our lives as completely as if she'd never existed. The divorce had been finalized 3 months ago, with Wesley retaining full custody of the children. Sarah had been forced to return the money she'd stolen from my inheritance fund, plus penalties, and her attempts to claim any portion of Wesley's assets had failed spectacularly once her fraudulent behavior was fully documented. She'd tried, in the weeks following her exposure, to contact Wesley with increasingly desperate messages claiming that she'd only been trying to protect the family, that I had somehow manipulated Robert into fabricating evidence, but the recordings of her own voice planning my destruction had made her protests pointless. The last I'd heard, she was living with her parents in another state, working as a retail clerk, and still claiming to anyone who would listen that she was the real victim in the situation. Wesley had blocked all her attempts at communication, and the restraining order ensured she couldn't come near the children or me. "Grandma, can you tell me about the bus stop again?" Emma asked as we finished the cupcakes. This had become one of her favorite stories, the night everything changed because I helped a stranger. "Well," I said, settling onto one of the bar stools at my kitchen counter, "it was Christmas Eve, and it was snowing very hard. I was feeling very sad because I'd just been to your daddy's house, but I wasn't welcome there." "Because Sarah told lies about you," Emma said solemnly. She understood, in the way children do, that sometimes adults make terrible mistakes. That's right. "So I was sitting at the bus stop feeling sorry for myself when I saw a man who needed help. He didn't have money for the bus, and I only had $5, but I gave it to him anyway." "Even though you needed it for hot chocolate," Emma added, knowing this part by heart. "Even though I needed it for hot chocolate. And do you know why I gave it to him? Because it was the right thing to do, even when you were sad." "Exactly. And because I chose to be kind even when I was hurting, something wonderful happened." "You got Robert," Emma announced triumphantly. "I got Robert," I agreed, "and through Robert, I got my family back." The doorbell rang and Emma jumped down from her stool. "I'll get it! It's probably Robert!" She was right. Robert stood on the doorstep with James perched on his shoulders, both of them grinning broadly. James had apparently convinced Robert to take him to the park before the party, and they both looked windswept and happy. "Did you have fun?" I asked, giving Robert a quick kiss as James scrambled down and ran to show Emma something he'd found at the park. "The best kind of fun," Robert said, wrapping his arms around me. "Though I think I'm getting too old to push a 4-year-old on swings for an hour." 5-year-old, I corrected. "As of today." "Right, 5-year-old. That's even worse for my back." I laughed, still amazed at how natural this felt. Domestic moments with a man who'd come into my life in the most unexpected way. We'd been officially dating for 4 months now, though Robert claimed he'd been falling in love with me for much longer. "I was falling in love with your character long before I met you properly," he'd told me one evening as we walked through the park where I'd once sat alone, feeling sorry for myself. "Watching you live your life with such grace under pressure, such kindness despite everything you were going through, how could I not fall for that? Even when I looked like a desperate old woman counting change at the grocery store, I'd teased. Especially then. You had every reason to be bitter, to be angry at the world. Instead, you were still finding ways to help other people. The afternoon party was everything a 5-year-old's birthday should be. Chaotic, loud, and full of laughter. Wesley had invited several of James's friends from preschool, and the apartment was soon filled with children running around while their parents tried to maintain some semblance of order. I watched Robert help James blow out his birthday candles, saw Emma hanging onto Wesley's arm as they played pin the tail on the donkey, and felt a contentment I'd never thought I'd experience. This was what family was supposed to feel like. Messy, loving, inclusive. "Mom," Wesley said, appearing beside me as I cleaned up wrapping paper. "Can I talk to you for a minute? Privately?" We stepped out onto the balcony, where the noise from the party became a pleasant background hum. Wesley looked nervous, which immediately made me worry. "What's wrong?" I asked. "Nothing's wrong. Actually, something's very right, but I wanted to talk to you about it first." He pulled out a small velvet box, and my heart skipped a beat. "Wesley, you're not for me," he said quickly, then grinned. "Well, not directly for me. I picked this up for Robert. He asked me to help him choose it." I stared at the ring box, not quite comprehending what Wesley was telling me. "He's going to propose?" I whispered. "Tomorrow night. He's planned this whole elaborate dinner, but he wanted to make sure he had my blessing first, and Emma's and James's. We all told him that if he didn't marry you soon, we were going to have to stage an intervention." Tears were blurring my vision as I looked at my son. My wonderful, loving son who had not only found his way back to me, but was now actively supporting my happiness with a man he'd come to consider family. "He really asked your permission?" He said he knew how important family was to you, and he wanted to make sure we all felt comfortable with him becoming a permanent part of our lives. "And?" Wesley's grin widened. "I told him we'd already been thinking of him as family for months. The proposal is just making it official." I opened the ring box with trembling fingers. The ring was perfect. A simple, classic solitaire that somehow managed to look both elegant and practical. Robert had chosen well. "Do you like it?" Wesley asked anxiously. "I love it," I said, then looked up at my son with wonder. "I love that he asked you. I love that you approve. I love that this family we've rebuilt is strong enough to welcome new members. You deserve to be happy, Mom. After everything you've been through, everything you sacrificed for me over the years, you deserve every bit of happiness Robert can give you." We stood on the balcony for a few more minutes, watching the city below us come alive with evening lights. A year ago, I'd been alone, rejected, facing a future that held nothing but increasing isolation. Now I had my family back, my grandchildren in my life, and a man who loved me planning to propose tomorrow night. "There's one more thing," Wesley said as we prepared to go back inside. "Robert wanted me to tell you, he's not just proposing marriage. He wants to adopt Emma and James officially, if that's something you'd be comfortable with." I nearly dropped the ring box. Adopt them? Their biological father is completely out of the picture. Sarah made sure of that years ago. She didn't want James's father involved because he didn't meet her social standards. And Emma's father has never shown any interest in being a parent. But I'm not their mother. That's your decision to make. Wesley shook his head. "If you marry Robert, you'll be their step-grandmother. But more than that, you'll be part of their legal family in a way that no one can ever take away again. Robert wants to make sure that what happened with Sarah can never happen again." The thoughtfulness behind the proposal took my breath away. Robert wasn't just asking me to marry him. He was asking to join our family completely, permanently, in every legal and emotional way possible. "What did you tell him?" I told him I couldn't think of anything that would make me happier than having him as the children's father. He loves them, Mom. Really loves them. Not just tolerates them because he loves you. Inside, the party was winding down. Parents were collecting tired children and leftover cupcakes, and James was beginning to show signs of the inevitable post-party crash. Robert was sitting on the floor with Emma, teaching her the paper airplane techniques he'd promised, while James leaned against his shoulder, fighting sleep. Watching them together, I could see what Wesley meant. Robert wasn't performing the role of caring adult. He genuinely enjoyed spending time with the children, patiently answering their endless questions, remembering their preferences and fears and silly jokes. "You're thinking very hard about something," Robert observed as the last guest departed and we began the final cleanup. "Just thinking about how much has changed," I said honestly. "Good changes? The best changes." That evening, after Wesley took the children home to their own beds, Robert and I sat on my couch sharing leftover birthday cake and talking about the day. He seemed more nervous than usual, confirming Wesley's revelation about tomorrow night's plans. "Rena," he said suddenly, setting down his fork and turning to face me fully. "Yes? Do you ever think about the future? About what you want the rest of your life to look like?" I smiled, knowing where this was heading, but wanting to let him find his own way there. "I think about it more now than I used to. For a long time, I couldn't see past just surviving each day. Now I can imagine actually being happy. What would that happiness look like?" I considered the question seriously. "It would look like family dinners where everyone feels welcome. It would look like grandchildren who run to me when they're hurt instead of running away. It would look like someone to share the good news with, and someone to hold me when the news is bad." Robert took my hands in his expression tender and serious. "It would look like waking up next to someone who loves you exactly as you are?" "Yes," I whispered. "It would look exactly like that." We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, both of us aware that we were on the verge of something life-changing, but neither quite ready to take the final step. "Robert," I said finally, "whatever you're planning for tomorrow night, are you sure? I'm 63 years old. I come with a complicated family situation, a limited income, and probably not many years left of being able to keep up with those grandchildren." Robert laughed softly, bringing my hands to his lips and kissing my knuckles gently. "Rena, you gave away your last $5 to help a stranger on the worst night of your life. If that's not proof that you're exactly the kind of person I want to spend whatever years I have left with, I don't know what would be. Even though I'm old and set in my ways? Especially because you're wise and know what really matters. Even though I cry at commercials and worry too much about everyone? Especially because you have the biggest heart of anyone I've ever known." I leaned against his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady rhythm of his breathing. "I love you, Robert Hayes. I love you too, Rena. More than I ever thought I could love anyone." The next evening, Robert took me to dinner at the same diner where we'd had our first real conversation 6 months earlier. He said he wanted to come full circle, to propose in a place that represented new beginnings rising from the ashes of old endings. When he got down on one knee beside our booth, presenting the ring Wesley had shown me the day before, I said yes, before he could even finish asking the question. "Are you sure?" he asked, laughing as he slipped the ring onto my finger. I had a whole speech prepared. "I'm sure," I said, pulling him up for a kiss as the other diner patrons applauded around us. "I've been sure since the night you came back for me at that bus stop." We were married 3 months later in Wesley's backyard, surrounded by family and friends. Emma was my maid of honor, James was Robert's best man, and Wesley walked me down the aisle with tears streaming down his face. Sarah did not try to disrupt the wedding. She did not send messages or make threats or attempt any kind of revenge. She had simply vanished from our lives as completely as if she'd never existed, leaving behind only the memory of lessons learned about the importance of protecting the people we love. As Robert and I exchanged vows in front of the people who mattered most to us, I thought about that snowy Christmas Eve when I'd sat alone at a bus stop, convinced that my life held nothing but loneliness and rejection. I thought about the choice I'd made to help a stranger despite having so little to give. How that single act of kindness had set in motion a chain of events that brought me not just my family back, but a love I'd never dared to hope for. Sometimes the smallest gestures create the largest changes. Sometimes giving away what little you have opens space for abundance you never imagined possible. And sometimes, when you're 63 years old and convinced that all the good things in life have passed you by, a stranger at a bus stop turns out to be the beginning of your happiest chapter yet. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.